It's a very powerful moment when a CEO or CTO stands up in front of, the town hall meeting and says, this is our problem, this is our goal, but I'm not really sure what's the best way to solve this. You guys are the experts. Let's talk about it, right? And to show that kind of vulnerability and humility is intensely powerful as role modeling.
They don't want to talk to their boss, their management, their board. They don't want to talk to their peers because they are supposed to know what they're doing. Whether you want more innovation more easily, you are feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we'll uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead today. Joining me is Fortune Buchholtz. Fortune has 20 years of business agility and being a fractional whatever, as well as an accidental-proof engineer and AI-assisted agile logician. She's currently working with Kent Beck to formally verify a Rust B+ tree library in Lean 4 for his Living Objects project. Welcome, Fortune.
Thank you for having me, my dude.
What does verifying a Rust B tree library in Lean 4 mean beyond being Kent's typist?
So, there is such a thing kind of as provable programming. And so what I'm going to do is what I am doing with Kent, because we're pair programming, right, is I'm using a theorem prover. That's what Lean 4 is. It's a theorem prover. And it takes every line of code about the B tree that I write, and it makes sure that it's mathematically and logically valid, whether it's arithmetic or a logical proposition. And this way we can walk through the structure of the B+ tree, which, as you know, is an essential data structure used in almost all large databases. And we can prove that Kent's novel algorithm is literally, perfectly, mathematically correct.
This is great. What size?
No bugs.
Except for whatever bugs are in the theorem prover. Has the theorem prover proved itself to be valid?
So what's interesting is that Lean 4 has not yet been formally verified itself. But I think that the people who do Lean 4, they're called the Lean Fro, the Lean Research Organization. I'm sure that that's on the top of their mind.
I would think so. When, Fortune, did you first recognize that integrating your whole self and bringing that into everything that you do might be a valuable approach?
Okay. So this is a great question, and I like the whole, direction that we're going to go here, which to my mind is about authenticity and psychological safety. I'm just going to lay that right out there, right? So I think the first time that it ever happened to me was at a place I used to work in New York City, which was kind of a Wall Street tech vendor. It was called at that time Summit Mises. It's a British software company. And when I began the prediction market there, that's when I really was able for the first time to just come out, be myself, say the innovation story that I wanted to enact. And luckily, at that time, I had a very receptive management. Right, this was before the fall of Lehman Brothers in 2008, at a time when it was still really possible to do a lot of experimentation. So I went to my management and I told them I wanted to, run a prediction market where the employees would buy futures on project delivery times. That was a very interesting project. I had one of the earliest and I think most successful corporate prediction markets. And there was a large software update, almost a rewrite that we were doing at the time. And everyone was uncertain when it would come out. So I just had the people who were working on it, the employees, buy futures to tell me, to aggregate it in as a market. And that made a lot of sense, of course, because I was in a Wall Street environment. I think actually to this day, that's the only place I've ever been able to be fully myself without penalty, shame, ridicule, harassment, or testimonial injustice. Honestly, Mises Summit was such a great place.
What made that so great, and what is not present in all the places you've been since, especially now that you're coming in as independent consultants, so have a lot of choice over who you work with?
Yeah, so of course, as a consultant, you have to draw back a little bit and be much more self-aware because you're often coming into situations that are very fraught. And people are uncertain, they're anxious. People don't hire transformation specialists or change agents like myself unless they really want to undergo a big change, right? And that's always an anxious time. People reside at different places on the J change curve, right? Some people are happy, some people are anxious, some people have fallen in despair. So you just have to be a little more neutral and observe more quietly from a calmer place to, understand and see what it is that the context requires. Does that make sense?
Yes. So let me say this back and tell me if I have anything wrong. When you ran the Futures Project, that company, whose name I've forgotten already.
Yeah, that was awesome.
You could just do whatever you want, be your whole self there, and people accepted you, embraced you, and it was all good. And where there was interpersonal friction, you talked it out, and people went away better, stronger, happier. And in the work that you've done since, it's not necessarily that you couldn't bring all of you there. It's that you're choosing very intentionally which parts to bring at which force to, in your judgment, best help the situation move forward in the way that you see they need to go, and they're telling you they want to go, however aligned those are or are not.
Definitely. So, I hope that I never come in with wants, right? And that I'm able to actively listen to what people think they need. Because I truly believe that everyone, and even every organization, has its own agency, right? And the goal here is to support and open the door to change in a way that you can hear, right? That the organization can see, and that allows that agency to bloom. Right. So I might, if I'm asked to, change my stance, teach, mentor, advise, whatever. But generally, I'm going to try to let the organization move forward in the way that is most organic to it, according to the situation and context that it finds itself in. Right. We can't just cargo cult. You know what I mean?
Yes, and this is a difficult balance that you and I try to weave, where what they believe they want is in some degree aligned with what they actually want, which they may or may not be ready to fully understand or admit yet. And a lot of what they've brought us in to do is to help us recognize what they really want versus what they say they want, and how much to let them go along unaligned versus jiggle them a little bit in hopes that they will recognize a little more of what they actually want versus sometimes outright confronting them. There's this whole spectrum of degrees of forcefulness, gentleness that can all be done in safe ways that might be useful in any situation, and sussing out what to do, what not to do, what's best going to help them do what they really want, as far as they can admit to what they actually believe they want, is why we have so much fun.
Well, I've worked in a lot of places, and I have to say only twice did I find that there was alignment and agreement on what the business wanted, right? And I have worked in many places where they kind of didn't know what they want, they didn't have a strategy, or they had goals and mistook goals for a strategy. So I often end up running all kinds of strategy workshops, like the Liberating Structure Strategy Not Working, or X Matrix, even though that's not really for strategy per se. But, there are lots of things that you can do once you have the trust of the SLT, and better yet, of the board, to be able to help solidify that vision of why you're really here and what the business really would benefit from. And they will know that themselves, right? Because they're the experts. I'm not, right? I'm not like a consulting firm that comes in with a prepackaged solution and drops it on your toes, right? And I'm going to, as I said, wait and observe and build trust. You have to build relationships, right? Because it's really rude to go to people's houses and tell them within 10 minutes to rearrange the furniture. So let's not do that.
Yes, especially when they may not even want the furniture there at all.
Well, it's hard, right? I guess in our business, right, lots of people say, oh, people hate being changed. People are naturally resistant to change. But, that's not my philosophy at all. My philosophy is exactly the opposite. I have never, ever in my life, but there may be a few people who are like this, I've never seen anyone refuse a new flagship phone or a new car. Everyone wants those things, even though they're huge changes, right? Expensive changes that have a major impact on your daily life. And yet everyone wants those things. And in the same way, everyone has something that they don't really like about their job or their environment. And they would love to change, but they may not feel they have the power to do so, or the organization has not empowered them to do so. And then that's where I'll come in. You know what I mean? You have to find what it is that the change that people want and start there. Yeah.
So how do you build cultures? How do people feel safe and empowered to bring their unique talents into everything they do, to admit to themselves, and then to let their peers and management know, what is the change that they want to make? What are they there to make happen?
Mm-hmm. I get it. So you want me to tell you about culture building for psychological safety. That's what it sounds like to me. And so as long as we're talking about psychological safety, we're going to be cool because it's one of my favorite topics, right? To me, first of all, I'm going to start off with this, right? To me, psychological safety means a culture of rewarded vulnerability. Okay? And once you have that ability to be vulnerable and be rewarded for it, right, then it becomes a lot easier to just be your own bad self, right? So culture is everything that we don't notice after 90 days, right? I think this is another truism, right? So if you go into an organization, or if you go into a new job, or you join an e-group, right? At first, you're trying to like learn the lay of the land, understand, what to do, how do people act, what are the rituals, what are the habits, right? But then after 90 days or so, you get it. And it just, you're like fish in water, right? You don't really notice the water until the taste changes. So I don't build culture, and I don't change the culture, right? Because the culture's there already, and it's worked for them, right? It's worked for them for a long time. I mean, their current business has been very successful, right? I mean, they've gotten to where they are. They're still in business. They have a certain number of employees. So that's really great, right? And the point is to amplify what is working and what's great about that culture, what it is that made people want to work there and love working there in the past, right? And to bring that back to life. This is what my friend Kent Beck kind of calls desert to forest, right? Maybe they need change. Maybe the culture has atrophied a bit. So we're going to kind of amp up that liveliness where it can be a living human environment. Right? So we understand that some people have dysfunctional kinds of, cultures over time as the market has changed, as geopolitical events have overtaken them, right? And that's, that's easy to have happen because we live possibly what has to be the most volatile, unstable, accelerating time that humanity has yet seen, right? There's just the uncertainty is incredible. The market changes are a total whipsaw. And so to guide culture successfully, right, since the people who live in the culture are the ones who have to do the change, it's their agency, right? I am not going to talk about the culture. I'm going to take a note from Toyota, because I'm a big Toyota fan, right? And I'm going to try to work on the behavior. Because when we change behavior, slowly, baby step by baby step, right, then the culture will revitalize. Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm. Another definition of culture I've heard is culture is what we do when we don't know that we're doing it.
Yep.
And the only way to change that is to change the behavior, because in culture emerges out of what we do. Mm-hmm. Intentionally, unintentionally, accidentally.
Agreed. It's complex and emergent. And I think our friend Dave Snowden would have a lot to say about complex, emergent situations, right? But even so, it soon kind of develops into an unspoken system that we can learn about, reason about, and feel, right? There's kind of an energy to it that we can work with. And I guess that's a phrase that I kind of got from Michael Hamann. So I thank him for that, feeling the energy of the culture.
I like that. That fits in with a lot of the way that I perceive the world. And feelings are not just emotions. We feel with our body, we feel with our heart, we feel with our spirit, mm-hmm. and with our mind. Mm-hmm. And by focusing on feelings and empowering people to talk about what they're feeling and how they want to change what they're feeling, that gives us a way to get into how to do that in a way that's safe for them and for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to disagree. But you have to do more than just talk, honestly, although the discussion is important, right? Because that helps build the relationship and builds the trust that we need to even get started. So what I think is the most important for people in our line of work to do is to role model all the things we want to see ourselves, right? Role model the vulnerability, the trust, the learning mindset, the I don't know yet attitude, right? We should be the first to admit our mistakes, to seek help, and to live. Again, I'm going to quote Kent Beck. I don't know why. He's very quotable today. Sorry, Kent. And we're going to live in what he calls the curiosity gap, right? Between where I think I am and where reality lies, right? What's the difference between, my vision, but where I am, where is the reality? There's a big difference between those three things, and I'm going to fall into that gap. And I'm just going to live there in open curiosity, And then once I'm there and I have the ability to have these conversations, right? Again, I've talked about relationship, right? When we start this process, it's very important to me, at least, to realize that the relationship is almost always more important than being right. Right? So when people, say to me, oh, the management says we have to do Scrum, but Scrum is horrible. I hate Scrum. I'm going to be like, okay, that's great. And I'm going to display curiosity and acceptance of that statement, right? I'm not going to argue for one position or another, but I want to explore that point of view, and I want to especially explore the feeling tone, right? That goes back to the J curve. Where do you think someone who says, management wants me to do Scrum, but I hate Scrum, Scrum is the worst, are they, anxious? Are they fearful? Are they in despair already? What is that? Where are they? And so you have to look, again, what Michael Hamann calls the 5 windows of attention, right? We have to look at the whole field and feel the field and try to understand where they're coming from and let that rest while we slowly, work with that conversation over time. So to start that process, I use nonviolent communication. How about you?
That and other similar forms, yes. It's a great way to get...
Yeah.
It's a nice formula for people who aren't used to talking about what's going on for them, especially, let alone to anyone else, to start that process, because it gives them a structured way to do that so that they don't have to think about the form. They can focus on the content.
Exactly. And because the structure of the conversation helps avoid any appearance of conflict or confrontation too early in the conversation, right? Then it becomes much easier for people who are naturally shy or indirect to get started. Right? So that's a great thing. But once you have that relationship and once you've started to have these kinds of important conversations, then I personally like to come in and workshop Kim Scott's radical candor. Right? Because once I have the relationship and it's clear that I care about them, right? And I'm just not here as a consultant to drop, as I said, some framework on their feet, then I'm able to care for them personally, and they know I care for them personally. And then we can go forward into these discussions of constructive challenge. I don't know if you like radical candor or how much you use it.
I like anything and everything that helps people get more in touch with who they are and share that with the people that they're working with.
Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with that. So once we've reached that point, you and I, then I'm going to go to leadership, as I said, or even the board, and I'm going to coach the same authentic behavior and communication process and support them in displaying it in their own leadership groups, displaying it to the board, displaying it to investors, and displaying it to employees and staff, right? Because it's a very powerful moment when a CEO or CTO stands up in front of, the town hall meeting and says, this is our problem, this is our goal, but I'm not really sure what's the best way to solve this. You guys are the experts. Let's talk about it. right? And to show that kind of vulnerability and humility is intensely powerful as role modeling.
Yes, getting to that step where leaders feel comfortable saying they don't know is huge. One of the most common issues I see with leaders is they're afraid to talk to anyone about what's going on. They don't want to talk to their boss, their management, their board. They don't want to talk to their peers because they are supposed to know what they're doing. And if they admit that they don't, then they must not be doing their job. Never mind that everyone else is feeling exactly the same. And they're terrified to run ideas past the people that their team, their direct reports and below, beyond, because so many of them have had so many experiences where they say, I'm thinking about painting the office purple. And 5 minutes later, the office is purple. Just so many of us are used to being told what to do and not being invited to explore.
Indeed. Again, so that's a question of how they've shown up in the past, right? They've
Yes.
taught people to behave that way, right? Now, the question is, where do people kind of usually learn this sort of Tayloristic behavior? Even if they don't believe in it, they've often been taught Taylorism. They grew up in that sort of hierarchical environment. Of course, their early jobs have also been Taylorist or even Welchist, right? And so they have absorbed that unconsciously, even if it's counter to their stated beliefs. So again, that's again a question of coaching. How can we show up differently? How can we act differently? And a really good way to practice that, I think, again, are to use Toyota tactics, right? Not only to help people move forward with beneficial leader-standard work so they don't feel so overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis, so they're not constantly fighting fires, and so that they have time to actually strategize and do their personal work. And I like, honestly, I know this is really weird, but I like to use Toyota Kata for this. Right? I like to say, okay, we're going to make a behavior experiment, a mindset experiment. And we're going to go through the daily 15 minutes coaching cycle of the Toyota Kata, just on a daily basis, using the learner's board and everything to help them slowly make progress. And what's great about it is it's not I'm coaching them in one direction, I'm not giving them advice. They're choosing what experiments to do. And they're coming back and saying, oh, this worked, or this didn't work. I want to try something else. I need to change something. I met this obstacle. It's their own experience and it's their own choice at all times. It's their own agency.
I do something similar. Everything is about what feels like the right next step. Okay, great, let's take it. What did we learn? What does that suggest we do for the next step? It's very simple. We don't have to know where anything is going. We don't even have to know what feels right. If we're not sure what the right next step is, we can take a random step and we'll learn something. Even if we learned, well, I don't know what I learned. There's still more data than we had before.
Right? That's the mindset. That's the sort of the mindset shift, right? And I guess Amy Edmondson, right, talks about mindset so much, right, in her work on psychological safety. But what's also is that not only does she have the more classic, books on mindset, but she also has this wonderful book. Have you read it, The Fearless Organization?
Don't believe I've read that one.
Whoa, read that. So she kind of puts all of her research together, all of her experiences and some case studies. And she, from that, draws, I guess, advice or step by step. Maybe you would even call it a framework, although I'm, really cautious of that word framework. But it shows you how to create a safe environment where people can take these kinds of interpersonal risks, and how displaying this kind of vulnerability and creating this atmosphere will fuel that kind of learning, innovation, and the high performance that the business seeks, right? Now, I know that Amy has a slightly different definition of psychological safety than I do, right? She calls it a freedom to speak out without a fear of punishment. Right? But I agree with that. I mean, that's an aspect of it. But again, I think that it's more of a cultural issue, right? It should be ingrained in the way that the entire business thinks, feels, and acts together. And again, this is a Toyota idea, right? Respect and safety is baked into the environment. And that's I think, where we should get to, much more than just the speech aspect, which again is an important part of it. But to my mind, it's not the whole thing. I don't know what your experience has been with that.
With which specifically?
with the difference between just feeling like you can speak up safely, as opposed to doing this deep culture work of rewarding vulnerability at all times. Because there are different kinds of vulnerability besides just speech, right?
Yes, how we dress, what shows we admit to watching, or books we admit to reading, music that we listen to. And
exactly.
There's a lot of talk these days about bringing our whole self to work. I've said that a lot myself, and what I've realized, especially through conversation with some very helpful people, is that it's not something that has been implicit for that in me that I am endeavoring to make more explicit, because it's not explicit for most people. It's bring the parts of yourself that you want to, and not the rest. That being forced to bring all of ourselves all the time, it's just as bad as being forced to bring none of it. And the most psychologically safe environment is one where we have the freedom to show up in the ways that we feel is best for us, and as we get really pro at this, for everyone else as well, without needing it to be in a certain way or a certain frame or anything connected to what we did last moment or next moment.
I get it. So again, that's all about agency and about people's empowerment to make decisions in the moment.
Yes.
Right? So, I have consulted or worked with other consultants in places where there was an unspoken way that you were supposed to speak to clients, a certain way you were supposed to dress, a certain length of answer you were allowed to give, a certain vocabulary you were allowed to use. And you could be judged very harshly if you didn't meet those unspoken standards. So I think making things explicit, as you said at the beginning, is really important.
One part of culture is what we can say and what we can't, and how we can and can't say it. So we've talked a lot about how to bring all this squishy people stuff into a business environment. What's the business value of doing this? Why does the business care that we have agency and psychological safety and can bring up parts of ourselves we want to and leave the rest behind for now? Or just not bring them out front and center?
Right. So this is where, I like to think about Clark's book, Timothy Clark's book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. Have you read that?
That one I'm sure I have.
Yeah. So that's a really good one. And what I like about it is that he gives, kind of some KPIs or things to look for so that you can measure psychological safety and see the improvement on your business value. Right. So I don't know if you remember last year, there was the huge disengagement survey.
Don't remember.
From Gallup, right? Gallup did a worldwide survey about employee disengagement. And it found out that, of course, most employees are disengaged, right? They've quietly quit, as we used to say a couple of years ago during the pandemic, right? And Gallup estimated that the cost of this kind of disengagement was 9% of global GPD, or about 8.8 trillion. Right? And so for each company, it's going to be different, but it's going to be big. So if you think of your, revenue or your profits, whatever, as your GDP as a business, you should probably say, am I losing 9% of that just by not having a psychologically safe environment? Then, of course, you can also notice that the high performers leave where they can't speak up. Right? So these kind of high-performing employees are expensive. I mean, maybe not like Mark Zuckerberg to AI employee, $100 million a year kind of expensive, but they are very expensive. And so I don't know how many people you've hired. I'm sure a lot. And you know that replacing employees is incredibly expensive. The whole search process can cost often as much as the salary, and sometimes more, depending on the role, sometimes twice as much in my experience. So just retention is huge, right? And then, of course, we have the burnout and the mental strain, right? As you talked about earlier, right? People live in fear. They carry a heavy cognitive load. So they don't have creativity. That harms your innovation. They don't have resilience, right? They fall into silence. And again, silence is the death of high performance, right? So without high performance, without the creativity that fuels innovation, you don't have any innovation. Nobody suggests ideas. And your product cycles are going to lag your competitors, right? And I've worked at places like that, right, where people were struggling to build what for them were bold new features. But because the market had leaped ahead of them, in terms of psychological safety and employee empowerment, had already become table stakes in the market. So they were already way behind and struggling to catch up because they hadn't created this modern kind of environment. Do you know what I mean? And then I want to talk about something that's really dear to, everyone in finance and the senior leadership team, and that's your EBITDA drag. Right? I'm going to get real. I'm not afraid to talk about money. We've been all squishy and huggy, but I'm going to talk to you about the money, right? And another aspect of no psychological safety is going to be poor flow efficiency. Again, we go back to the higher turnover. We're going to have tons of rework. And in software or technology, this is going to mean bugs, defects, technical debt. And those eat away at your margins so much, right? When is a bug most expensive to fix? After the customers found it.
How much do you find that the executives and boards, senior leaders that you talk with, just get this already? And how much do you finding that some education is required for them to make the connection between the financial customer issues that they're struggling with and the root causes this is coming from of psychological safety, empowerment?
Yeah, so I think it depends on their background, honestly, right? Leaders who, are in HR tend to have been exposed to these ideas. Whether they can put them into practice is another question. On the other hand, if maybe people come from a stricter sort of MBA background, right? They have heard lip service paid to these ideas, but they haven't ever really been focused on as something that's essential to business management, right? They are mostly taught classic, as I've said before, Taylorism or even Welchism. and they're really focused on like profit, revenue, cost accounting kind of things, right? And also just the culture of that level of business, right? They have a culture too at higher management, at the SLT. They have their own culture. They have their own expectations. They have their own strict standards of behavior that hobble them and may prevent them from saying themselves what they want to say. And once you talk to them about that, they can say, yeah, I've experienced that. And then you can say, well, can you imagine how much harder it is for people who are, that graduate, the graduate entry, right? The junior dev, the new QA person, the receptionist, right? So think about how that may impact them. And that may be something that a lot of MBAs don't think about because they're taught to think about, people in terms of cost and never in terms of value. And particularly software and technology is always a cost or an investment at best, and it's never or rarely seen as an asset, right? This is another Toyota concept that I'm not so interested in the return on investment as I am return on assets, and I see people as our prime asset as well as our product, even if it's a legacy product, right? I love legacy products. They're like good horses. They've brought us this far.
Say more, please, about the difference between return on investment and return on asset.
Well, that's like an accounting thing, right? So how assets are accounted for and how investments are accounted for is going to differ according to whatever country you're in or whatever your tax rules are. But what we want to say is that what we have and what has brought us this far has value to us and is precious to us, right? So we want to invest in our people because they bring us key business capabilities that allow the business to expand, right? I don't want to lay people off, right? I could do some kind of short-term, Welch type game where I lay a whole bunch of people off, collect, the stock market goes boom, I collect my bonus, right? But then what have I really done for the business in the long term? Have I harmed it? Have I made it more sustainable? Right? Have I harmed my innovation? When I outsource, I do the same thing, right? Outsourcing, honestly, although I understand why people do it and why they feel they need to do it, scares me, right? Because it means you're putting the entire future of your company in people who don't work for you, except contractually, people who don't necessarily have loyalty to you, and people who don't really care, right? Very recently, I worked for some lovely people who had a product in one country, but the people who really worked on that product were mostly in a third country that was very far away, and they had never even been to the home country of this corporation. And so they were asked to provide a service to people they had never met, had very little idea about, in a completely different country. Right? There was no effort to make them or to involve them in a situation of care. Right? Who is the customer? Why is the customer important? Why do I want to serve this customer? Besides, I have a contract and I'm making, X dollars an hour, right? So all the corporate innovation, all the corporate knowledge was going out to people who were not invested in success in any way, right? And of course, when those people left, right, when the contract expired or when they raised their rates and then the business decided, we're going to find a cheaper outsourcer, right, then all of the institutional knowledge left the room. And the businesses left, I don't know how this product works. I don't know what this product really does. I don't know where its tech debt is. I don't know where its gnarly defects are, right? And they're not in control. Right? So they lose control of their most precious asset because they have focused purely on cost and purely, on investments, right? Just money, right? Not, again, protecting what is precious to you. So, ROI is such a funny thing, right? I made this remark, I guess, to Simon Wardley the other day, right? That I've also worked at places where they were not as agile as perhaps they might have wanted to be. And so stakeholders who wanted features would be forced to write these huge business cases, right, for their feature or their idea, right? And they would be very lengthy, be very long, and they would often require proven ROI, right? If we spend so much, we're going to get this much return, right? And so people would, really try to do this. They would do a good job. They would spend a lot of time trying to do this, right? I'm not blaming anyone, right? Because our fundamental belief is that people are good people who come to work for the right reasons, but they're caught in systems that don't serve them, don't serve the customer, and don't meet the market, right? And so this was the situation. These people are writing these huge business cases in places that wanted to be more agile and wanted to have organizational flow. They had to sort of, look into some crystal ball, use some market research, hire some experts to create this ROI, right? And then after they had laid that out, gotten it approved, right? They discovered that neither finance nor portfolio had any way to track the return on individual features. Right? The system wasn't in place, right? So this means that as soon as people learn this, what do? Right? They immediately predict hockey sticks, right? We do this, we build this feature, and then magic profit, right? And they do that, and the case is approved, and they build their favorite features, but it's very disjointed from the business. So I like to move away from that concept. And I mean, portfolio management is obviously extremely important, and investment's extremely important. But I just think you want to look at it from a slightly different lens. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
That does make sense. You answered at least part of my question. And one of the things that I'm taking away from this part of the conversation is ROI might be useful, but it can only ever be useful if we have a way to connect the experiment we're making to the outcomes we're predicting. And if any part of that chain is missing or faulty, then we can't predict with any accuracy. And so either it's probably going to be useful to fix or change or get rid of the parts of that chain that are faulty or not working or not present, because maybe they aren't even necessary. And maybe the outcomes that we're trying to predict aren't really the outcomes that matter.
Agreed. So we don't have crystal balls. This is kind of a basic rule of business agility. And if we had working crystal balls, if you have a working crystal ball, someone send me your working crystal ball, because my name is Fortune and I can't make them work. So, dude, I need one, seriously. But, we just have to deal with the modern environment by thinking in a slightly different way. So that's, again, goes back to the mindset shift that we want to coach and educate about, and that we want to make safe for everyone to have, right? To go on that journey through the experience of behavior change to that culture and mindset change. Right? Because no one is going to believe what you and I are saying right now about ROI until they've experienced it for themselves. Right? I mean, why would you listen to me, right? I'm just a blonde hippie girl from California, right? Whereas maybe you went to Wharton, where August business professors, lectured you firmly on the importance of ROI. But when you actually see it in today's, contemporary environment, then you're going to have kind of a different approach, and you're going to say, what can I do? And then I'm going to say, well, maybe we take a pinch of Toyota. We look at ROI from that perspective. Maybe we take a pinch of beyond budgeting. Maybe we look at agile contracts. Maybe we think about our ecosystem and our suppliers and our employees as partners, not as costs or rivals or, co-opetitioners, whatever. But there are many different stances you can take that are going to be appropriate for your moment, your context, and your market, right? For your particular customer. And those are what we want to open ourselves up to, instead of just saying, oh, some guy at Wharton told me X 20 years ago. Was that too harsh? Was I radically candid?
Not too harsh.
Thanks. We're speaking truth to power, people.
This is right. And which is a perfect segue into my next question of how do you help people, your clients, your boards, the people you pass on the street, find their way through all the change, uncertainty, and overwhelm that is what seems to be life is all about these days?
Yeah, VUCA, right? We're never going to get away from the VUCA. And it's definitely the massive acceleration, I think, still takes people by surprise, particularly when we talk about the shiny toy of the moment, right? The LLM. I remember certainly when I've talked to people about LLMs in-house, whether they should build or buy or how they should use LLMs, they always assume that you have to do it. It's some kind of like FOMO, right? And I'm just like, is it right for you? How would you know, right? How could you go find out whether that's right for you? Maybe it is right for you, you know? But don't just do it because you read about it in the Wall Street Journal. So that's a question of you have to ask and listen and have that relationship. You have to sort of hold the door open to that path of inquiry, right? So help is such a loaded term, right? Because it can be condescending. Right? It can feel a little noblesse oblige, let me help you, right? Oh, because you can't do it. But again, as I stressed at the beginning, everyone, every corporation, every culture has agency if it finds it, right? So that's, again, a question of guiding, opening the way, and holding that space for exploration and learning, and letting them come to their own conclusion, right? And also making them comfortable with the fact that some experiments give null results. And the ones with the null results are actually the most important. You know what I mean?
Why do you say that?
Well, because you don't want to go down the wrong road too long, right? So if I try an experiment and it doesn't work, right? If it's a fail whale, as we used to say, right? You want to stop. But we've all been on projects that we know aren't working. And really, when we think about it, could never have worked. But we have to keep doing them for reasons that are mysterious to everyone, right? But when we adopt this kind of mindset, which is accompanied or takes root in psychological safety, the idea that all work is learning and emergent, right? Then we have the ability to say, be a Google, pull the plug.
Yes, this is one reason I focus so much on tiny experiments, so that we have built in this decision point every step along the way of where do we go next. So we don't, even if we know, and it might even be true, that the far off goal we're heading toward is exactly the right place to go, we have no idea if the right path to get there is straight. It might look like it is, and there might be a great big hidden quicksand there. It might be full of rodents of unusual size just waiting to come out from behind the trees.
Great Princess Bride reference, my man.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And it may be that that path is exactly the perfect path to take. We have no way to know. Mm-hmm. All that we can really tell is what's the next step, and what do we guess is the next step after that and after that. And the farther we get away, the less certain we are.
Agreed, right? This is why Toyota Kata is central to my practice. Absolutely.
How do you know when you're offering help versus inflicting it?
When I'm offering help versus what?
Inflicting it.
Yes, I'm so terrified of inflicting help. And honestly, in the past, this was something that I fell into quite a bit, right? And I really want to, I guess, thank Michael Hammond's class. If you haven't taken Michael Hammond's class on vertical development, I really encourage everybody go right now, take, or at least read his book, Evolve Agility. And also Simon Powers' ICEEC course, because Simon Powers is really excellent at this. He doesn't talk about it at all, and yet you learn it. So that's something that you have to learn to feel. And I'm not going to be able to describe that process to you because it's something that has to happen inside yourself and in the space between the other person. So you have to be intensely self-aware of what you're doing and what your own motivations are. And you have to feel that connection between you and watch the other person, right? Really listen to them, and not with giraffe ears, as the nonviolent communication people say, right? You have to put on your giraffe ears and listen with your whole being to their whole being. How's that?
I like it. And as a first step for people who aren't in touch with the giraffe ears yet, we can simply ask. Instead of saying, let me help you with that, we can ask, how can I help you? Or would you like some help?
I would even avoid the word.
What would you like me to do next?
Personally. I like that much better, personally.
Yeah.
I've had that happen. How about you?
Oh, yes. Even
and
after
that's fine. You
me
say,
in.
cool.
Yes.
It happens, right?
And also, it goes back to some of what we were talking about at the beginning is if they invite us in and then they tell us to go away, how much they really want us to go away and how much are they saying, I don't know what to ask for yet, so I'm pushing you away, and please, will you help me figure out what to do? It's a delicate balance.
So that just requires patience, right? And discernment. So we can be, I guess now we can be, a highbrow and make a Chaucer reference. We have to be patient Griselda. Sometimes the people who really love us are enchanted by some new thing, some new framework, some new shiny technology, some other, consultant who tells them something else, and they push you away, right? And so then you just shake their hand, say, call me when you need me, if you need me, and just wait. Right? They have to find their own agency, because if you push it on them, it never works. In my experience.
Yes, that's inflicting help, and it rarely works and often backfires.
Exactly. So just don't do it. Don't even go to the help situation. And I guess that is, that's a lot of psychologists have talked about that for a long time, right? I guess that would be sort of Ericksonian, to disdain the giving of help.
Yes. So, Fortune, for people who are super engaged by what we've been talking about today and want you to come help them make a change, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. Go to my profile. Be sure that you read my self-description. I'm a very optimistic, high-energy person. I'm extremely California, even when I try not to be. So if you're cool with that, be sure to read that, and make sure you understand that what I do is flow, organizational flow. And if that's what you think you want, then just drop me a message on LinkedIn or use the link in my profile to set up a little meeting with me on my public calendar.
That sounds great. And I will have that link in the show notes.
Great.
You have maybe the most unique free gift of anyone I've had on. Please tell us.
Thank you. Read it.
So what Fortune is offering you all audience is the first person who comments on this with the one word that links the most important attribute of an agile team with the most important goal of formal verification for software, then you get a free 30-minute chat with Fortune.
Yep, about anything.
And I can tell you that the conversation you've heard here is just a small bit of what you get.
The fire hose. Sorry.
Fortune's typing skills are not the only reason Kent Beck uses her as his typist.
No, the pair in a driver navigator situation isn't always just a typist. Certainly when you're not coding with a genie, right, which is what he calls the LLM. Though I do learn a lot from him, but we're also thinking partners, right? And I think that's why Kent pairs with me when he has time, is because he and I think alike in some unusual ways. And the more that I work with him, the more I think our ways of thinking blend together. So I think a lot more like Kent Beck than I ever did before. And I hope that maybe someday he'll tell you that he thinks a little bit like me.
I am confident that is so. This is one thing I always appreciated about pair programming. Even when I was there with decades of experience and I was working with someone straight out of college, and other people would say, "Why are you doing this, Michael? Like, they cannot help you." I said, "Oh, no. If nothing else, they probably know more about the details of the latest version of language than I do. And even if they don't have that, even if they don't have any idea of what's going on, the strategy, what we're working towards, nothing else, they can be there pointing out, hey, you forgot a comma there, you typoed that." And those are all super useful things. Finding the missing semicolon can be one of the hardest compiler issues to find.
Yeah. Another thing that I really like about working with Kent is his thinkies. He has 100 thinkies. I don't know if you subscribe to his Substack or read his website or go to any of his presentations over, but he does have these little helpful heuristics for thinking that help you think out of the box. And I certainly use these thinkies a lot. So if you're not familiar with them, you, as well as the people in the audience, I urge you to rush over and learn about thinkies. They're great, honestly.
And those different perspectives are the best reason I know to have curious conversations with someone else, because you're going to get a different perspective.
Or at least learn how you really think yourself.
And also that. What would you like to leave our audience with today, Fortune?
So I guess I'm gonna be a little bit of Rich Sheridan here, of Menlo Innovations. Right? I'm going to hope that I can leave everyone with joy. Right? Because the kind of work we do seems hard, but it's really joyful when you change the environment and when you can help people set themselves free. Right? There's really nothing like that experience. And that's what I guess I'd like to leave everyone with, that optimism and that joy that change is great. And even though people do have a place on that J change curve, which can seem kind of low, there are changes people desperately want. And all you need to do, as I said, is hold the door open so they can find the agency to do that. How do you like that?
That is lovely. Thank you, Fortune. And thank you for this wonderful conversation today.
Great. I'm very glad to have been here, and thank you for having me again.
You are most welcome. And audience, thank you for joining us as well. Fortune and I would love to know, what are you opening the door at least a little bit to today? Thanks, and have a great day.